Thank you, Jesus, for your presence in this place. Amen. Would you thank Bill and his team? Well, I see that you survived. You survived Christmas. For some of you, it might have been touch and go there for a second, but we made it, and we're here together, and so glad that you were here. Hope you had the opportunity to make some great memories with your friends and family. My family is here with me today. I'm so excited to have my son Adam and his wife Hannah. She is a school teacher in Valparaiso, Indiana, and Adam is a youth pastor there. Always love when you get to visit. Then my daughter Jillian is here. She's working on her master's in ministry. Her boyfriend Noah will be here this week. We're very excited to have him here. And then my youngest son Samuel, he's on his way to see his girlfriend Carly's family, and praying that he has traveling mercies. But so love my family. My wife's around here somewhere, and I love my wife, and I love the way she loves the Lord. And I know every time you see my wife Kim, if you've met her, you think, how did she get so lucky as to marry a stud like Pastor Todd? It boggles the mind. But no, we both know I'm the lucky one. Hey, before I get into the sermon, could we thank the true hero of Christmas? And of course, I'm talking about Amazon. Give it up for Amazon. No, I'm kidding. I know it's Jesus. I know. So where were we? Oh, yes. I was on a plane with an action team on my way to Spain when suddenly I was escorted off of the plane. Remember, I told you that I would tell this story. Well, here it is. But before I tell the story, let me give an important disclaimer. I did nothing wrong. It was not my fault. Children, thank you for being with us today. If you don't hear anything else from this story, here's what you need to know. Pastor Todd did nothing wrong. So we're at the gate getting ready to board the plane. And the attendant said, we would like to have some volunteers who would check their baggage at the gate because we don't have room for them all under the plane. That's fairly common. And so I volunteered because I'm a nice person. So I took my bags to the gate. We begin to board. We go to our seats, and I see that I'm sitting beside Tim and Judy. And I got to tell you, the look on their face said it all. It said, great, 8 hours with Pastor Todd on a plane. They were very excited. And so when I sat down, I realized that I had left my laptop in my checked bag that I had just left at the gate, and you're not supposed to do that. I did nothing wrong. And so I said to the flight attendant, may I go and get my bag? And she said, well, it might be too late, but you can go check. So I go to the front of the plane, and I see that my bags have already been brought downstairs to be put under the plane, and so I think, okay, that's all right, I'll just go back to my seat. And the attendant at the front of the plane said, can I help you with something? And I said, I left my laptop in my bag. They've already taken it down. It's too late. I'll just go back to my seat. When I hear a voice behind me say, I'll get it for him, and I turn around, and it's the co-pilot of the plane. And so the attendant looks at him and says, are you sure? And the co-pilot says, sure, I don't mind. So he goes out of the door, down the stairs to get my laptop out of my bag. As he's leaving, he says, here, hold the door. Now let me ask you, if the co-pilot asked you to hold the door, what would you do? So I held the door open. That's all I did. I did nothing wrong. So then the co-pilot and I began to have a conversation. He was down, way down the stairs under the plane. I was up, and he's like, is it this one? I'm like, no, it's the next one. Is it this one? No, one more. He gets the laptop. He brings it up. He hands it to me. I thank him. I go back to my seat. Everything is fine. About 10 minutes later, when the plane should have been taking off to take us to Spain, an attendant walks down the aisle and says, sir, come with me. And I think, First class? Me? A promotion already? But no, that's when it happened. I was escorted off of the plane in front of all of my friends. And a team member then looked out the window, Alyssa, and she saw that they were removing my bags from the plane. And then 2 guards came in and swabbed down my seat. They took me outside, and they had 2 guards standing beside me. Everyone was watching. They gave me a pat down that was far too personal. And all these people are walking by, and I'm giving it my best. I didn't do anything wrong face. But then the boss comes. I knew he was the boss because of how he walked. And he came within just a few feet of me, and he was yelling at the co-pilot who was also brought off the plane. And he was yelling at the co-pilot, and then he turned at me and he said, "Sir, why did you leave the plane?" And I said, "I didn't leave the plane." And he said, "There was an eyewitness who saw you leave the plane." And I decided to play my pastor card because we don't get to play that card very often. And I said, "Sir, I did not leave the plane. I'm a pastor on this plane with 19 other members. We are going to 2 churches in Zaragoza, Spain to do work for the Lord. I need to be back on that plane." And he looked at me and he said, "You've got 2 choices. Either your team leaves without you, or I escort the whole team off to join you." And I thought, I don't like either of those choices. He said, "Either way, the plane is leaving." And sure enough, at that point, the plane pulled away. And I could just imagine how devastated my team must have been. I could hardly stand the heartache that they were going through. I could just picture our team director, Stephanie James, probably looking over her husband, Merlin, saying, "Merlin, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Todd is the heart and soul of this trip." And then I thought of Tom and Dale, our other directors. They were probably thinking, how are we going to survive without Todd's excellent carpentry skills? But I heard later what really happened after I left. Were they worried? No. They were putting on their face masks to go to sleep. They were inflating their travel pillows. They were choosing their in-flight movies. Some of them were high-fiving each other across the aisle. And I only had one true friend on the whole team, Linda Boots. She's the only one who tried to appeal to the attendants and saying, "You can't take him, he's our pastor, we need him." Thank you, Linda. And we even had travel buddies. I had a travel buddy, Denise Spott. She was supposed to be watching out for me. She failed. And while I'm out there waiting, while the plane's taking off, I get a text from her saying, "Sorry about your luck, buddy. What can I bring you from Spain?" Then I was taken to a room where I was all alone with 2 guards posted outside the door. And I was lonely. And it was a long, long, long wait. And then finally, boss man comes back into the room and he says, "Mr. Keller, we're sorry for your trouble, but we've rebooked you on a flight to Lisbon tomorrow." I was supposed to be going to Spain. "Then you'll have a quick connection that we think you can make to Madrid. And here's a voucher for your trouble." A voucher. A voucher. Here's what happened. Apparently, the crew can never leave the plane once they're on. That's against the rules. And everyone should have known that. But there were 2 eyewitness accounts. One said that the co-pilot left and went down. The other one said that I left the plane and went down to get my own laptop, as if I would do such a thing. And so boss man had to let the plane leave so he could go watch the security footage Did you know there's security footage? They're watching you at all times. So they had to watch the security footage, which proved that I did nothing wrong. It wasn't my fault. But still, even after that, I was escorted through the airport, back through the opening, back to the ticketing desk, back through security. I barely made that flight to Lisbon. I did miss that connection to Madrid. The airline double booked me a ticket, so that looked suspicious. So I had to spend the night in Lisbon without my suitcases, but then finally did reach Spain a couple days later in Zaragoza. And here's the team now on the screen, and rotten, every last one of them. Except for Linda, they're on the front row. Thank you, Linda, my only friend. And I gotta tell you, it was a magical work and witness trip. Best I've ever been on. Our team killed it. They did incredible work that helped 2 different churches there, and I can't say enough about how great that trip was. And at the end of this service, I'm gonna give you a sneak peek and a chance to sign up for another action team trip that is taking place in the fall to Siloé, Colombia in South America. When I was being escorted back through the airport, one of the attendants who was there escorting me, he looked at me and he said, "Mr. Keller, they just told me what happened to you. I'm so sorry. Seems to me like that was quite a waste of time." And I said, yes, it was quite a waste of time. Have you ever looked at your past events or your past behavior or your past choices and thought to yourself, well, that was quite a waste of time? We have this blessed Sunday to look back on the year and to the year ahead. So how did you spend your time in 2025? Ephesians 5:15-16 says, "So be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days." As you think of 2025, maybe you spent way too much time scrolling. Maybe too much time worrying about things. Maybe you indulged in just a little paranoia. And maybe there was some avoidance. And here we are, the first Sunday after Christmas. The tree is probably still up. The cookies might still be around. And there's a new year that is already knocking at the door. And God, in his kindness, gives us today this moment, this holy pause, this holy moment to ask, how did I spend my time this year? What was quite a waste of time? What should I not repeat? What didn't bear fruit? What habits, attitudes, or ideas don't need to follow me into 2026? John 15:16 talks about our purpose. It says, "You didn't choose me," this is Jesus talking, "but I chose you. And I appointed you, all of you, to go and produce lasting fruit." So friends, today, as you think about it, how did we use our time in 2025? Today, we're gonna look at a woman in the Bible who lived in very scary and uncertain times. And yet she chose habits and behaviors that helped change her future. Her name is Ruth. What a beautiful story. Let me tell you her story. Ruth lived in a place called Moab. She married a man named Israel, but then she married a man from Israel, but then something terrible happened. Her husband died, and so did her father-in-law and her brother-in-law. And that left Ruth, her sister-in-law, and her mother-in-law, Naomi, all alone. Can you imagine how scary that would have been for these 3 women? So Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, decided to go back to her home in Israel. And so she told Ruth, "You don't have to come with me. You can stay here and start over." And so Ruth had a choice to make. She could go back to what was familiar. She could look for an easier path. She could try to only protect herself. But instead, in this great, powerful passage, Ruth chooses God's path and God himself when she says to her mother-in-law, "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." So Ruth left everything she knew and followed Naomi to a new land, trusting this God. Now understand that they were very, very, very poor. They had nothing. So Ruth had to work very hard from sunup to sundown, gathering grain from the fields just to survive. But I want you to know something. God was providing for her. Ruth met a really nice man named Boaz. And Boaz began to take care of Ruth and Naomi. They married and they had a family. And generations later, from Ruth's family came King David and eventually Jesus. A story that started with so much loss ended with a really big win for the entire world. And here's why this story matters now. Just days ago, we celebrated the birth of Jesus. And Ruth, she is one of his great-great-great-grandmothers. See, the Christmas story didn't begin in a stable. It began generations earlier, even before Ruth, with everyday choices made by faithful people. Sometimes we imagine Bible stories happening in calm, peaceful, almost cartoon-like worlds. But this is not Ruth's world. Her world was filled with so much anxiety. You know, when we are faced with anxiety, we usually practice one of two postures. We either practice panic or we practice faithfulness. And Ruth had every reason to panic, but instead she chose to be faithful. Now, College Church, as you know, is a church of the Nazarene. And that means that we Nazarenes have a certain way that we think about Jesus. We notice some very important things about him. And when we look at this story, as Nazarenes, we notice that God's grace was reaching out for Ruth the entire time. He was providing for her. All Ruth had to do was respond. See, we believe grace invites, and we respond. Now, Ruth didn't know how the story would turn out, but by practicing faithful in these difficult moments, she was unknowingly already practicing Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take." See, Ruth didn't have all the details, but she knew who she was following. She was following a God who was providing for her every step of the way. And know this morning that Ruth did have other options. Ruth could have run back to the old gods, to her old appetites. Ruth could have chosen to look for a quick fix. Ruth could have chosen simply to protect herself. She could have chosen to avoid responsibility. She could have chosen comfort over character. But instead, the Bible tells us that Ruth made a powerful decision. To herself, she said, "I'm not spending my life on things that won't lead me closer to God." Titus 2:12 says, "We are instructed to turn from godless living and sinful pleasures. We should live in this evil world with wisdom, righteousness, and devotion to God." See, Ruth was faithful, knowing that fear is quite a waste of time. Regret, it's quite a waste of time. Bitterness, it's quite a waste of time. Always scheming and trying to get your own way, it's quite a waste of time. Isolation, it's quite a waste of time. Ruth teaches us many, many things, but mainly this: how we spend our time really matters to Jesus. You know, when we look at the story of Ruth, we see that she behaved consistently and lived out faithful daily habits. So let me ask you, what might 2026 look like if we choose to spend our time growing in the following habits? Habit number 1, church, direction before details. She said, "Where you go, I will go." She didn't say, "Where are you going?" She said, "Wherever you go, I will go." Children, that means that she obeyed even when she was afraid. Teenagers, that means she chose to listen to the main voice rather than all the voices. Adults, that means that she aligned her life toward God without knowing the outcomes. Once again, we don't have to know all of the details of 2026. We simply have to know who we are following. Habit number 2, faithfulness in small things. You know what Ruth did? She went to work. She showed up. She did what she was told to do. Teenagers, faithfulness looks like doing the right thing even when no one notices and no one is applauding. Kids, faithfulness is doing the right thing even when it's boring, even when mom and dad are getting on your last nerve. Adults, faithfulness is about a steady and abiding moment-by-moment love relationship with Jesus. Because God does big things through small faithfulness. Habit number 3, relationships over isolation. Ruth refused to walk alone. She did not withdraw. She did not isolate. Instead, she attached herself to God and to God's people and to God's story. With every small act of faithfulness, Ruth was shaping the family that would lead to Jesus. So what does that mean for us, standing on the edge of a new year? As we look to 2006, understand that while we can't control the year ahead, we can control our habits. We can choose how we spend our time. I mean, think about it. What shaped us as a church this past year? Now, in a few weeks, you're going to be able to celebrate as we review our year-end reports that explains what we've been up to as a church. And I've got to say, College Church, that you are involved in so many good things that are happening locally, nationally, and internationally. Thank you for investing so much time and habits and energy in fruitful ways that honor the Lord and other people. And so this message is not a slap on the wrist. I know some of you love your guilt, and when you don't have something to feel guilty about, you feel guilty about that. I know some of you love your guilt, but this is not that sermon. This is not a sermon about finding yet another thing to feel guilty about. This sermon is really a prophetic call asking us to simply consider our ways. Because while there were times when we did a lot of good, and you sure did, there were also some minutes where we spent a lot of time scrolling, comparing, arguing, catastrophizing. Oh, the catastrophizing. Spent too much time being offended. Spent too much time avoiding our time with Jesus and his word. Spent way too much time vilifying other people or people groups. Now, I didn't do any of those things, but maybe you or someone you know. But what if in 2026, we made some different choices? Consider this list. What if we chose prayer over panic, scripture over scrolling, gathering together over withdrawing, service over self-focus, integrity over convenience, loving others over vilifying others, hope over cynicism? Friends, look at this list. Kids, teenagers, adults, these are things that with the Lord's help, we can actually do. Let's read it again. Prayer over panic. Scripture over scrolling. Gathering together over withdrawing. Service over self-focus. Integrity over convenience. Loving others over vilifying others. And hope over cynicism. What a great year. When I look at this list, it reminds me of a walking tour that I took through downtown Bucharest in Romania when I heard about how the Romanians are choosing to spend their time as hopeful people rather than cynical people. See, after I left the action team in Madrid, I was then able to go and visit with several churches of the Nazarene, pastors, and missionaries in several other countries. Now, when I go and visit other countries, I don't have a lot of time for sightseeing, but one thing I always try to do is to take a walking tour through the historic cities. And so my tour guide through Bucharest was named Andreas. And he tried to show us downtown Bucharest as a city with layers, but with a complicated past. Andreas kept the tour relatively light until he took us to the balcony of the formal Central Committee of the Romanian Communist Party, where the infamous dictator Nicolae Ceausescu gave his final speech on December 22nd, 1989. During that speech, there was gunfire, and rumors spread that it was actually the dictator's army that was firing into the crowd. Now, I don't know if you remember that. I was in high school when I remember watching the video of that. And in the speech, Ceausescu, the dictator, demonstrated a complete disregard for the barbaric treatment of the Romanian people, many of who, year after year, would have to spend time in long lines from morning to night just to get basic necessities like bread and cheese. There was no work, there was no hope, and this took place year after year. And in Ceausescu's speech, it proved that this leader, this dictator, was completely out of touch with the plight and suffering of his people. And of course, this speech angered the people so much that the next day, when the dictator and his wife were trying to flee the country by helicopter, the people stormed that same building, even clinging to the copter, trying to keep them from escaping. Well, they did escape, but 2 days later, they were arrested and eliminated. My tour guide, as he told the story, was so stoic and somber as he explained what it was like surviving through decades of communist rule and the tortuous past or post-communist transition, even the political instability that still exists today. Andreas explained the Romanians still grapple with this harsh legacy of authoritarian rule and how it shaped the culture. Well, it really stirred me to hear his story and to feel the pain in his voice. And that night, I went to dinner by myself near the hostel where I was staying. My waiter came to my table and he asked what I had been doing that day, and I told him about my walking tour and about the heaviness that I was feeling about the story of Romania and what her people have been through. And he looked at me and he said, "You know, there's a whole lot more to that story." And I was curious, and I said, "What do you mean?" He looked around the restaurant and he said, "I'll be right back." A couple seconds later, he came back. He wasn't wearing his apron. He decided to take his break and sit with me for a while. He sat down and shared with me that his grandfather was the dictator's driver. And according to him, the dictator, this is just his version, the dictator actually wasn't the scapegoat and not really the one pulling the strings or causing the unrest in the city. He explained how his grandfather was imprisoned and how his family was treated in the years that followed, and even how they're treated today. And I could really see the pain in his eyes as he shared his side of the story. And just before his break ended, I said, "It must be really hard living with all the heavy weight of the past every day." And my waiter looked at me and said, "We choose hope." We choose hope. Hope reflects what many Romanians now feel. Yes, the past weighs heavily, but we are resilient. We spend our time actively shaping a new future. We can no longer respond with bitterness. What good would that do? We respond with hope. Church, as we get ready to leave and get ready to celebrate this new year, I'm reminded that our forward hope as a church is not just a feeling. Our forward hope is a daily response to Jesus. It's not a feeling. We're not chasing a feeling. We're following a person who knows all the details, who has all the resources, who can be trusted. And so each and every day, we make decisions that honor him. We can respond to Jesus in 2026 with an anticipation of the hope that he brings. And I'd like to call us to a decision point today, if I may. And this is an opportunity for you to stand and move in response to what Jesus is saying to you today. In a moment, I'm going to invite everyone, children, teens, adults, to move in response. Around the altars, you'll see that there are these 1-minute timers. And there are some in the back at the sound booth and on stools and baskets. There's enough for all of you. This is a pretty easy response, actually. There's really no reason not to respond. In a second, our musicians are going to play, and they're going to give you an opportunity to come. For our purposes, these timers are not toys. These timers are reminders that are asking us to reflect. How will we spend our time in the year to come? How am I using the time that Jesus has given me? I'm inviting you to participate in this easy way. And I pray that when you take this home and you put it on your desk, in your car, by your bed, I pray that it would be a reminder to you to ask Jesus to help you be a faithful steward of the time that he has given you. And maybe even pray as you come, Lord, help me use my time in faithful ways. Help me spend my time in fruitful ways. So I'm going to invite you now, if you would, even without music being played, if you would just come, if you would take a timer from the back of the room, from the front of the room. If there's someone near you who has some mobility issues, perhaps pick one up for them so they don't have to walk down. And then at the end, I'm going to be praying with you. Would you go ahead and come in response?